Welcome to Al-Mena, a new generation bringing new ideas of our fellowship together with unity. All of our speakers are shared on our WhatsApp audio groups and speaker channels. The links will be dropped in the chat. If you're listening to this recording and you need help, we have a way out that works. Please reach out and send us an email to calmena2026@gmail.com, all lowercase, and the crew will reach out and we will get back to you. We have invited this evening a good friend of mine, Young, to come and share a message of depth and weight for 45 minutes. My brother, the floor is yours.
Mina, Joey, for your gracious invite. Thank you, all service members. Hi, everyone. My name's Young. I'm a very grateful recovered addict. It's really good to be here in this moment and present with you guys today. And whew, when I listen to readings at the beginning of a meeting, often there's words that really stick with me as I'm trying to just sit and allow my mind to do whatever it wants to do. And the one that sat with me then was language of the heart. So I hope I can speak to you with language from my heart and from my spirit and from my soul and not from my mind, because that's where the main problem centers. And that's what really connected with me when I came into these rooms and as I stayed in these rooms, the language of the heart, people talking from their experience, but just there was more depth and weight. There was this authenticity to their walk and to the words that were coming out of their mouths. And like Pauline just said, there was laughter. There was also tears. There was also frustration. There was this whole heap of human emotions sat in these rooms and people not just staying clean. I soon caught on there was far much more than that. And so I became a seeker of God, of spirit, of power. I don't get too hung up on the words or even trying to figure out what this is. I can sit in the presence around me, within me today. But I became like that through my brokenness, through this desperation. And a word that's just come into my mind is a word from Bill's story, how dark it is before the dawn. And how true is that in my life and perhaps in yours? I can see people nodding. And this is the beautiful thing, isn't it? We are joined together by a common problem. And now we have this common solution of the 12 steps that leads me to this power. So how dark it was before the dawn. It was very dark for me. I was very, very broken. I've spent over 2.5 years of my life in various institutions. And so I was a low bottom drunk and a low bottom drug addict. I look back on those moments and those decades out there. And even before I picked up drugs and alcohol, and I can see by looking back that I was always seeking something. I know it was God today, but I didn't know then. I thought I was seeking happiness. I thought I was seeking the hit of a crack pipe or some heroin or some alcohol or some love or some gambling or something, always needing something to feel different than what I felt. And I remember as someone was taking me through the big book, I wrote in it, and I quoted this to someone today, I wrote in it, I always wanted a life different than my life. I need this. If only I had that girl. If only I had that car. If only I was a bit taller. If only, never being at the full stop where it's all good in this moment. Always needing to get somewhere. Always needing a next. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, no, fortunately, it was drugs and alcohol. Because, and that might sound strange if you're new in the rooms, because I wouldn't have said that then when I'm creeping around on the floor trying to look for crack cocaine and smoking toenails and robbing off the person I love and looking like I've just been dug up. I wouldn't have said, yeah, this is a gift, because it felt like absolute hell. And it was absolute hell. But again, how dark it was before the dawn. Something in me needed to die so I could be reborn. And I have been reborn. And I'll shout about that all day long. And, you know, I drunk and I used for a long, long time. And I loved it from day one. I loved the effect it produced in me. I loved the fact that it took me to a different place. You could say a spiritual experience, a change in thinking, behaving, reacting, a shift that felt better than reality. But because I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I didn't know what that meant, even after 4 rehabs, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't understand the allergy concept, although that should have been really obvious. Once I put one in, I go, 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 go. I burn my life to the ground. I build it up. I burn it down. And when I stop, my mind will convince me to go back to the very thing that sends me to hell. My own mind. My own mind. So this is why I say this is language of the heart, because I need something more than language of the head, because it's my mind that will trick me time and time again. But I didn't know that until I came in this time around. And so on Christmas Eve 2018, that was the day when I was surrendered. I didn't even know those terms until I came into the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous, and I heard people share those words. And today I don't just parrot the words. I look back and I feel that was my experience. And what I mean by that is I tried to surrender so many times. For the last 7 years of my drinking and my using, I didn't want to drink and use. I was going out against my will. And so when I say that I was surrendered, something in me shifted so that there was no argument anymore with you when you talked about what the solution was: God, spirit, power, love. I stopped arguing. I started to follow some directions, and I think back to that last psychiatric unit I was in. And I remember meeting a girl, who I liked. And I said to her, probably not the best chat up line, not that I do chat up lines anymore, but, to try and think, this will impress her. I said, I've only been in 2 psychiatric units. And she didn't look very impressed for some reason. I've only been in 2. But for me, that's kind of normal. Two's nothing, right? But I was in the last psychiatric unit and I did a last detox, and I come off a lot of methadone. I come off a lot of alcohol, and I was taking a lot of heroin and a lot of crack cocaine, because they're the things that took me to my knees. Also prescription drugs like Valium, diazepam, all that sort of stuff. And I'd also been stealing a lot of drugs off the psychiatric patients when I'm doing a detox, because that's the best my mind can do. That's the best answer that I can do, is take more drugs to come off drugs. And it was Christmas Eve, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was really cold. I remember those moments of feeling so cold to my bones, to my soul, waiting on the street corner in the winter. And it was like that when I left that psychiatric unit, and I had to make my way to a treatment centre in Scarborough. Now, I was in Sheffield, and it's quite a distance. Now, today, people who come into that treatment centre in Scarborough, they get picked up if they're in detox. Because often if they don't, they abscond, because their mind takes them back to the very thing that's killing them. But I had to make my own way there, and it involved 2 trains. And I remember I had this bag of clothes, and it was my whole life possession was in that bag. But it felt like the heaviest bag that I'd ever picked up, because I was so skinny, and I remember being so shaky, and I remember tears were coming out of my eyes, because I thought, I'm just going to die from this illness. I kind of knew I was going to use and drink again, but I didn't want to use and drink again. I had met my match. Alcohol, heroin, crack cocaine was my master. I knew it when I left that place. And why I tell that story, or this story, is because I shouldn't have made it to that treatment centre. I should have been drinking and using. Everything in me was wanted to drink and use. And I was talking to this with my sponsor the other day, and we shared our own experience, and it sort of matched up. There was something more powerful than my mind that got me to that treatment centre. I was being invited onto the path. This is how I see it anyway. I was being invited. I don't know then. All I know is, how am I going to get to this place? I can't hardly even carry this bag and walk up these stairs to change this train. And I remember I got to this place, and I just sat in this cafe. Which way will I turn? And I think about step 3 when I get to a turning point. In that moment, I didn't understand my life depended on this decision. I don't think I was even capable of making this decision. I think it was made for me. I was turned. I was turned to go into this strange treatment center. And little did I know, it was almost like that day I'd won the lottery. Because I went into this treatment center that was like a 12-step boot camp. All they did was big book. And the guy that set up that place, his teacher was Joe McHugh from Joe and Charlie. So I'd landed in a place that was going to feed me. It was going to feed me, not like the other rehabs that had just fed me food and stuff that wouldn't stop me ever from picking up. Because I don't know about you, but I did 2.5 years of relapse prevention. The words themselves, to prevent relapse. Relapse prevention doesn't prevent a drug addict of the hopeless variety or an alcoholic of the hopeless variety from relapsing. It does not. It sounds insane, doesn't it? Relapse prevention does not prevent a drug addict or alcoholic from relapsing. And why is that? Because there might be some new people in here. I'll tell you my experience. Because I can learn about all these things that I'm taught. But I would put down drugs and alcohol. I'd been walking down the street, no cloud on the horizon, feeling good. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, a thought would enter my mind and say, I can just have one. And in that moment, every single thing that I've learned to prevent me from relapsing, I'm unable to bring to my mind. Or even if I can, that insane thought always won out. Why? Because I'm a drug addict. I'm an alcoholic. I can't stay sober on my own power. But I don't know that. Like the guy I spoke to yesterday at this Unity Day in Hull. He was a lovely guy and he reminded me of me, very broken. He picked up after 6 months and he was baffled. He was like, I don't know why, Young. And he was trying to understand it. I think it's because I was triggered. I think it was because I got paid. And it reminded me of all the things that my mind used to tell me when I picked up. Oh, it was because the girl dumped me. It's this. Because I don't understand my illness doesn't give up on me just because I've decided I've had enough. And I said, you picked up because you were a drug addict and you didn't have the choice. You'd lost power, choice and control. And then I told him my experience and he started saying, yeah, that happens to me. Because that's like what you guys did when I came in. You didn't tell me you're this, you're that. You told me about you. And you said, do you relate to this, Young? And I have to admit, after 10 years of trying to stay sober and clean, my way doesn't work. My best plans don't work. But your plans did. The 12 steps, that this treasure map that leads me to this power, this beautiful big book that over the years has become like a beautiful ocean, and it gets deeper and deeper and it seeps into my heart and it seeps into my soul. This power that I'm sat in, that you're sat in, that I was asleep to, that I was in the darkness for so long, in the lower power of existence. Man, I lived in the lower power. I was a thief, a cheat, a criminal, all those things that I was never meant to be. You know, in the big book where it says, rarely have we seen a person fail who thoroughly follows our path. I was just on the wrong path. I just needed some alignment. I just needed some nudging. I just needed to wake up, a spiritual awakening, wake up to what is this moment and the goodness in my heart and the goodness in my soul. But because I'd been in drug addiction and alcoholism for so long, I was just so lost, and it took me so long to hear you, to see you, to feel your light. Because my self-will is so strong, and every time I got clean, my mind convinced me I wasn't going to do it again. I'm pulled back off the path. I'm listening to the problem once again that's telling me I haven't got a problem and telling me it's going to be different this time. So when I say I was surrendered, that stopped happening. My mind wasn't telling me it was going to be okay anymore. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Because this thing, you know, this spiritual path of the 12 steps, a lot of it doesn't make sense. When common sense becomes uncommon sense, language of the heart is not language of the head. Often I don't understand it. You know, like in working with others where it says, the more hopeless a man or woman feels, the better. That doesn't make sense. What do you mean the more hopeless I feel, the better? Well, because when I don't feel hopeless and I bounce in the rooms, I don't live this as a way of life like my life depends on it. I think the most important thing is to get a new tattoo or a new pair of Air Max or chase a girl round the rooms. I get distracted by those worldly clamours that don't get me into a recovered state. They didn't last time, the time before, but that's where my mind seems to draw me towards when I'm asleep, when I haven't reached that point of absolute desperation and despair. So on that day, Christmas Eve, 2018, and finally I can see that was, well, that's my clean date, but I can see that was the turning point. I was stood at the turning point, and I look back, it could have gone wrong so many times, but finally I started to hear you guys. It just took me a long, long time, and I don't know how I died. Actually, I do know how I died. I died to self on that day. Although, of course, self re-emerges, of course. But something died in me that day. Something died in me. And a light came on. It was always on, but I kind of started to feel just that little bit of maybe, maybe it can be different. And someone opens the big book with me, my first teacher, and he just poured his experience on these pages. And it was the first time I'd heard about the allergy. Can you imagine that? It's the first time I'd heard about this allergy. And it was the first time that I heard that I had a mind, unrecovered, untreated, will always take me back. And he didn't say, it's always going to take you back. He said, what does your experience show you of the last 10 years where you've been in and out of these places trying to get clean and sober? Does your experience tell you, your mind? Well, yeah, it does. That's why I'm in another treatment centre. And so we went through the 12 steps in there, and I had an experience, and I left that place, and I found a man who lived this as a way of life. He lived it. He lived it, and he was very, very loving, but very, I wouldn't say harsh, but he used to say things like this. You know you're going to die. That does sound harsh, doesn't it? You know you're going to die young. You know you're going to die. You've been messing about, haven't you? He said, look at you, man. You're 43 years old. You've got no girlfriend. I thought, oh, thanks, rub that in. You've got no car. Your family hate you. Kick a man when he's down. And he says, but I'll show you some love. But I care more about you than I do hurting your feelings, young. Because I'd done a lot of therapy when they'd say, there. And, look, I had a terrible childhood, but when I used to sit in therapy and trauma, look, I'm only talking for me. I'm not talking for anyone else, by the way. It was almost like throwing petrol on the flames of my resentment. Oh, your childhood and this and this. And I would just still be sat in the problem. I'm not shifting out of the problem like when I go through the 12 steps. No, I'm just sat in it. I'm still going over in my mind what they did to me and they did this. I'm not able to see that they're just broken human beings as well, like I saw in my step 5. I can't see that I'm living as a victim. I'm living in my past, but yet I'm in my present. The past is still affecting me today. Well, it's not today, but it was then. So this man said, he taught me so many things. He taught me that this was kind of a way of life. And one of the things that's come to my mind is that word, a bridge to normal living. I think this is a bridge out of normal living. Because normal living for humans, selfishness, greed, fighting, neediness, that's normal living. I need a bridge out of that because at the root of my troubles is selfishness and self-centeredness. So this is a bridge for me, or for us, 12 steps, Cocaine Anonymous. This is a bridge into spiritual living, 4th dimension, world of spirit, all these worlds that used to freak me out because I had no experience of what they are, but I do now a little. World of spirit. This moment. Peace. A place where sometimes I'm not hypnotized by my mind. That, oh my God, I've just got too much me and what do I need? And all the stuff that can disturb me today, but I have a program. I have God. I have you guys. I have the newcomers. I have the old timers. I have the fellowship of the Spirit. I've created the fellowship that I crave. Because I I was going to say see you next Tuesday, but I'm not going to say that today in a meeting. No way. I used to be a real moaner in my first year in recovery, moaning about because suddenly I'm a year in and I know everything about the big book. I know everything about what you should be doing in your recovery. I'm very much pointing fingers at how everyone's doing it wrong. I'm a year in. But I think, for me, I just go through these stages, and all the old timers, they were just like kind of nodding, thinking, I've seen you before. But they love my enthusiasm. So they kind of just were like, okay, yeah, just let him get on with it. He'll come out of it, hopefully. And when I used to moan to my sponsor about how the meetings were terrible and they weren't carrying the message, he said, do something about it then. Set up your own meetings. Create the fellowship you crave. So I started open big book meetings in the city of Sheffield, and he opens this book with me and I start having another experience. I start to understand me managing my life just doesn't work. I start to be convinced that my life run on self-will is really not a success because I want, I need, I demand, I seem to be in collision when I don't get what I want. And I start to see that so clearly. And I start to see that this deal, it's not even about drugs and alcohol. That's the vehicle. That's the gift that brings me in. Because without that gift, I'd just be one of these people out there still needing and demanding and restless, irritable and discontent just by being a human with no awareness of God. Because that's a difficult place to be. I've lived it for 43 years. I understand a little. But there's a lot more I don't understand. I know that I don't know. And I want to remain teachable and I want to remain like that today. And I love that quote. I think it's from Rumi. Me seeking God is like the fish in the ocean looking for the water. I'm already in it and I've been in it all my life from the first moment I took my first breath. I'm in this power, but I'm so asleep. I've been conditioned almost against spirit and against power. I've been conditioned to believe that the way to peace is through happiness. No, ignore that. See, the words just come out. I've been conditioned that the way is money, is things. Bill calls them worldly clamours, doesn't he, on page 54 and 55? And I think when I get to this step 2 deal, where it's like, am I willing to believe? What's blocking me? Well, all my old ideas, everything I've learned is blocking me. From the moment I go to school, why do you go to school? To get an education. Why? You need a job. Why? Because you need stuff. You need a house and you need a car and you need. And even from being a young child, you sit me in front of a television at Christmas or any time, I watch adverts as a young kid, all these things are going into my mind. All the kids who have toys look so happy. That's life. That's what life's about, getting stuff. But what I understand today, because I've had stuff in my life, material things. When I used to do what I used to do in music and stuff. When my main purpose of life is to get, something is taken from my soul. When my main purpose of life is to get, the sunlight of the spirit is darkened. And what you guys showed me, that the secret to life is about giving, is about being useful. And the more I give, the more the light goes on inside me. That's been my experience the last 6.5 years. The more I give, and thank God for the teachers in my path, because they were all, and they're all people that just give, they give their hearts and they give their soul and they give the most precious thing a human being can give, their time, because it's so limited on this planet. Tick, 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 tick. There's my death. I said this to someone yesterday and they got freaked out. I said, maybe we've got 20 years. Maybe I've got 20 years left, if I'm lucky. So do you know what? And they were like, oh my God, why'd you say that? I said, well, when I understand that, why am I going to waste another moment being miserable? Or why am I going to waste another moment just trying to get and da, da, da? But it's easy for me to say these words. Without help, this is too much for me. Without help from God, my ego wants control. And it goes back to those old ideas, because what's coming to mind is there's a word in the big book and it's relating to step 9. But, a lot of these words I can kind of relate to a lot of things. And it says there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. I've only been in the program 7.5 years. I lived the way I lived for 43. I thought the way I thought for 43 years. I took the way I took for 43 years. I reacted the way I did for 43 years. I have all these old ideas. There's a long period of reconstruction ahead. Lifelong. I was speaking to a vicar the other day, because that's how I roll, having tea with a vicar. I would have probably been robbing him in the past. Shoot me now. And I said to him, do you still get crazy thoughts in your head? And he said, yeah, of course. Of course I do. I'm just human. He said, my first thought is sometimes really insane, Young. I said, thank God, because we claim spiritual progress, don't we? Not spiritual perfection. When I was in that last detox, or probably every detox, because every detox that I'd go in and I'd start coming off alcohol and heroin and crack, I'd coming off all the drugs, I'd often start weeping, I'd start crying, and my mind would feel all over the shop emotionally. I'd be watching some stupid pop video and I'd start bawling my eyes out. And I'd say to some guys working there, why do I feel like this? And one guy said to me, why do you feel like this? Because you're human. You're meant to feel. You're meant to feel, Young. You've just been numbing your soul with substances for so long that the experience of being human now feels foreign. So there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. And this is one of the beautiful things about 12 Steps and Cocaine Anonymous, and the transformation that's happened in me and that happens in the people that live this as a way of life. I'm able to experience life in all its beauty, in all its intensity, and not once do I want to change the way I feel. And sometimes I can feel uncomfortable in sadness. Sometimes there's a fear that grips me, etc., etc. But I have a program today. I rely on God. In the book it also says, relating to the fear inventory, because as I walk this walk, as I did a step 5, as I continue to live this as a way of life, I understand when it says driven by 100 forms of fear. I understand it more and more. We are now on a different basis. The basis of trusting and relying upon God. Because if I'm not trusting and relying upon God, then who am I trusting and relying upon? The very mind that got me into this mess. The very mind that tries to tell me that I'm not enough and that I've got everything in abundance. The very mind that tries to say, I'm trusting and relying upon God. Most of the time, not all the time. If I was trusting and relying upon God all the time, I wouldn't need to be here. Because my ego rebuilds, my self-will is very strong. And I did step 3 with someone this morning. And we talked about this turning, not handing. I'm not handing anything. I'm turning. I'm not giving my will away and taking it back, because my will is my will. It's inside my soul. And I think about, how do we turn? Because it used to confuse me when I was new in the rooms, and I'd come in and I'd cuss and I'd moan and I'd do the things that I was doing. And people, very lovely, beautiful people, would say, just turn it to God, or hand it, they'd say, or turn it to God. And I'd think, I don't understand what you mean. What do you mean, turn to God? How do I do that? And when I look back and think, I was turning to God without even knowing that I was turning to God. By going through the 12 steps, I was turning away from my direction, from me trying to sort out the problem that I can't sort out. By me praying and meditating, I'm turning away. I'm sitting in silence. I'm listening for the melody of life. I'm turning. By me holding my hand out to you, I'm turning away from my selfishness. I'm aligning my spirit with God. But this is what happens to me. So I do these actions. I live this as a way of life as best I can. I don't take my foot off the spiritual gas because I understand what I am. I don't forget those moments on my hands and knees looking for cigarette butts in my estate. I don't remember those moments waking up in withdrawal. I don't remember those moments stealing liquor out the liquor store and getting chased. And is anyone like me? When you get chased by the police, you can run really fast. Man, I can run so fast when I'm getting chased by the police. Like, I don't remember, but I don't remember feeling the fear though, thinking if I get caught, I'm going to get locked up and I'm going to be in withdrawals for the weekend in the cell. I do not want that. I don't forget those. I don't forget not eating for days on end. But I don't forget the kindness you showed me when I came into the rooms, that you continue to show me, your patience. I don't forget seeing hope and some sort of light in your eyes when you're talking about what the solution is. And when you talk about the word God or Spirit, I know you're not lying. I start turning. I'm being turned without even knowing it. By the surrender or being surrendered, I'm being turned. And something pulls me in. What does it say in the big book? If you want what we have, willing to go to any lengths. It says that, doesn't it? Something like that. If you want it, does it look attractive what we've got? Does it? Man, it looked attractive what you had. Do you know what? Anything would have looked more attractive than what I had when I came in. Anything. Oscar the Grouch from Sesame Street, that would have looked more attractive than what I had when I came in. It would have. Living in a bin would have been more attractive than what I had when I came in. You should have seen where I lived. It was worse than a bin. And are willing to go to any lengths to get it. I remember my sponsor saying, are you willing to go to any lengths to get it? And I thought it was sobriety. It was a life led by Spirit. It was a life of kindness. It was a life where I can put up my hands and I can reveal to you my flaws and my defects. And I can share that I shouted at a neighbor the other day and I felt ashamed. And I'll share about that because it's just coming into my mind. This is the irony. This is where God kind of says, right, here's some lessons. Here's an invitation for growth. Here's to remember what you are, young. You're just a really flawed human being. You're still broken. The dog's still inside and it can still bark. I was on the phone to a sponsee talking about step 3, talking about how I turn my life and my will to God. And then this neighbor starts shouting, and I shouted at this neighbor. That is not practicing spiritual principles. I thought I'd cease fighting anything or anyone. And the sponsee was like, oh my God, John, like what? But you know what? This is the miracle for someone like me. I used to be a fighter, man. You know, my name's Young. I look like I do. I was at school in the 80s, a lot of racism that I had to fight. My dad taught me, you got to fight, Young, as a boy, or you're going to get bullied all your life. And I don't want that. So the miracle is, that was the first time in 7.5 years that I've shouted at someone. That's the miracle. And I spoke to one of my teachers, this old timer, this beautiful old timer, and she told me the story of Moses, because that's what she does. She tells me stories to relate it to my experience. And she says Moses took the people down to the town, told them the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not kill, the other 9, which I don't really know. Yeah, you know. And they said, that sounds amazing. We're going to live our life like that. In the same way that I think, yep, I'm going to live my life by spiritual principles. And she said, could they live up to them? Of course they can't, Young. You can't live up to your standards that you've now set, but the joy is it's become objectionable to you. The fact I'd shouted, didn't swear, I just shouted, it's not who I want to be today. And it caused me pain. And I did a step 10 around it, and I made an amends, and I prayed, and I discussed it, and I'll reveal it to my fellows. Because that's what I need to do to reveal my ego that keeps rebuilding. But the fact is that I've had a profound spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, and it keeps on happening to my soul. I'm not the man I used to be. I have been reborn. I have been raised from the dead. I'm sure if you check my DNA, it would be absolutely different than the day I walked into Cocaine Anonymous. Just this profound change in my attitude and outlook on life. I do know a new freedom and a new happiness. I was lying in bed in meditation this morning, and that just seeped into my heart, this new freedom and new happiness, even when the wind of life blows. The time during COVID when my auntie was sick, where she had dementia, and I went to look after her, and it was just a beautiful experience. What would have been a really difficult experience in the past become something joyful and beautiful even in the pain. See, that doesn't make sense. How can something be joyful in the pain? Well, it was, and I don't understand. Well, I kind of do, because something had happened to me by then. So I was kind of taught by my first teacher. He said, as soon as we're through these 12 steps, I want you to promise me that you'll help others. And when I made that promise, I knew I would keep it. And I've always been in the big book with people, taking them through the steps since that day to this day. A lot. I do this a lot because I love doing it. It feeds my soul, and hopefully it will help someone else. And this is another thing that's happened through this awakening of my spirit. I've just been drawn towards doing this. It seems a pleasure and a privilege. And I was talking to someone about, if I'm not all the way in, it would seem an effort. And I don't like effort because I'm lazy. This just seems joyful. And look, I get it, man. We are where we are. Maybe someone's not there. My experience is, the more I threw myself in to live in this as a way of life, being deep for me, not deep as in anything else, just deep for me, in steps 10, 11, and 12. Always been in service. Because I seek to serve today. I have a purpose of serving you, serving anyone, not just drug addicts and alcoholics, trying to be a decent human being, because I've got some debts to pay. I was taken for 43 years of my life. Now it's my time to give. And as the world, what's that phrase? As I give to the world, so the world gives to me. My soul is fed. I get soul food when I'm helping you, because you are me. Every single person in the world is just another version of me. I've never gone to sleep at night, laying awake at night, not being able to sleep because I've been too kind. Never. And so all I need to do is pause, breathe, and allow myself to be led. And as I do that, my whole attitude and outlook upon life continues to change. I continue to see that I'm just a flawed human being, but I've got a purpose. I feel like I'm on a mission, man. I do. That's how I feel in my heart. I feel like I'm on a mission. Sounds a bit weird, even as it comes out of my mouth, but that's what I feel like. But I didn't start off like that. I started off thinking I was going to die from this illness. I started off just hopeless, feeling scared, thinking I'm never going to get this. I've been doing it for years. I'm never going to get it. I hadn't been doing it for years. I'd been in the meetings for years, and they were very important. Something was dragging me back to them. But I'd never been deep in the 12 steps. I'd never even done the 12 steps. I'd never tried out God. Like what? God was in me, but my mind was trying to resist. And it still does that today. My mind still tries to argue with God's will, my self-will. It still wants to drag me off the path. But I'm awake to it today, a little bit more than I was before. In this step 10, the watching my mind, not being hypnotized by my thoughts. God, help me go deeper into life so I become less attached to it. So I'm so grateful for this fellowship that, and I wasn't even going to come to this fellowship because I used to go to, I still do Alcoholics Anonymous, but I was going to another fellowship for 7 years, and someone said to me, and angels or messengers often come in the form of criminals, drug addicts. And I don't know when they're there. But this conversation I had with a guy that I was in treatment center with, and he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Why don't you try Cocaine Anonymous?" I said, "Nah, load of cokeheads. I'm a better class of drug addict. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a crack fiend. I'm a heroin addict." That's how twisted my mind was, right? My mind tries to separate me from other human beings any way it can. And I need to be connected to you, so I'm connected to the sunlight of the Spirit. And he said, "Well, it's not about cocaine only, Young. It's drug specific. Unspecific, if I don't know, whatever." He said, and they use this big book. And I've seen a lot of people go there and they're really enthusiastic and get well. But here, check this, he said. They stay well. A lot of them. Do you know what? It was quite sad the other day. I went to a face-to-face meeting in another city, and I'm traveling. I get the privilege of traveling around a lot on this path, and I went into the meeting and I looked around, and I hadn't been there for 2 years, and there was no one there that were there 2 years ago. And it made me quite sad, but that's quite common. So, but this is the thing, and I share this every time I share. We have 100% success rate for those who live the 12 steps as a way of life, trust God, clean house, help others. That's as simple as the program is, isn't it? Trust God, clean house, help others. I do that every day, and I don't just stay clean and sober, but I become a better version of me, and I want to help you more. This is what we have in Cocaine Anonymous. If there's anyone here who's feeling scared, broken, thinks they won't get this, we all have, what's it say? There is a solution. I go on to the bitter ends. I keep trying my way. And people used to say, "Is your way working?" Or I accept spiritual help. That's the choices that I had when I came into the rooms on Christmas Eve 2018. I could carry on the way I was going, or I could accept spiritual help. And then it goes on to say, this we did, this I did, because I honestly wanted to, and I was willing to make the effort, because I understood what was at stake. I understood my step one, and I'm going to drink and use again, no matter how much the necessity or the wish not to. So I turn and I accept spiritual help. And I start coming all the way in. Unity, service, recovery. I start hanging out with you guys. I get into the 12 steps. I start serving. I start thinking of others. And as I start going through, and as the months go on, and as the years go on, life feels a little bit lighter. My mind starts, the more I pray and meditate, my mind starts slowing down, because it was very busy when I came into the rooms. And I start to see the smiles on your face. And I start to feel the softness of your heart. And then some of that starts to seep into me. And then it seeps into others. Because maybe now someone will hear something I say. Maybe I can be of use. Maybe. And so today I love shouting about what we have here. How even the most broken like me can grab hold of this with all the desperation of a drowning man. I'm so very grateful today. I hope I've said something that makes sense or helps someone. My number's in the chat. Anyone want to reach out to me, I'll always pick up the phone or ring you back. I've got so much love for Cocaine Anonymous. I owe my life to you guys. Sending you all so much love. Thank you so much, guys.